back here. First things first, we are going viral. Browns kicker Zane Gonzalez missed 4 kicks in a 3-point loss to the Saints on Sunday. So the Browns faithful took action in New Orleans, holding kicking tryouts right on Bourbon Street.
In New Orleans? Big Browns contingent in New Orleans?
No, there's a small Browns contingent in New Orleans.
Well, yeah, this is
Guys
after the loss. There's a lot more Browns there.
Sunday after the game. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I thought it was from yesterday. I was confused. My bad.
Yeah, the other ones we couldn't get them on film because they were drunk. They had a reason to drink.
Well, and Zane, poor Zane, you said why you feel bad for him. Guy had an injury.
Really? What was
it?
He had a groin injury. He had a groin injury. Which groin?
We
got to figure out which groin. Left groin or right groin. But
he started complaining after he got cut. Yeah, because they were trying to hope to be able to. You can't cut me because I'm hurt. Yeah. Let me tell you what, your feelings are hurt. Get the packing, man. Get the packing. You're not a kicker.
Does not have a lot of sympathy for kickers, man.
Just do your job. Like, what else you got? We got people here who do stats. We got people who do graphics. People who hold the jills. Like, they got a job to do. We don't ask them to be on TV, but it helps us if they do their job. And if they don't do their job, watch how much sympathy I have for them.
Deontay wants to be on TV, he's telling me.
Yeah, no problem. He's got a great radio career.
You don't even.
Sorry, Deontay.
I mean, working on Nick's show.
There you go. Time for some stories to start your morning. While as many as 10 teams were interested in trading.
They got high def?
For
go ahead.
For Josh Gordon. Oh my God.
That's a lot funnier if you've seen him.
It's week 3, and Dez Bryant is still not on the team. Nick, get it out of your system. What does this tell you about Dez?
Hey, Nick, what is this telling you about Dez? Come on, what's it telling you since you were negotiating this contract? Let's go back to this offseason.
Killing my side
when
business.
Jerry Jones was set up the meeting with Dez. Nick went in there and represented him. What was your advice to Dez Bryant at that time?
Don't you take a dollar pay cut. They cut you, you immediately become the best wide receiver available. Dare him to cut you. Dez fired me as a client after that. However,
September 19th, he wakes up as still the best wide receiver available.
But in seriousness, after that was the worst day for Dez this offseason. Day he lost his job. What was the second worst day?
Yesterday.
Why?
Because they had wholesale wide receivers. People were clearing their board. Michael Floyd signs with Washington. Perryman, he signs with Washington. Now, these guys both troubled pass. Perryman, what's the trouble? He got a hard time catching the football.
Right.
All right.
Floyd, actual trouble off the field. And Washington's one of the teams Dez said I'd like to go to. The other team he said I'd like to go to, New England. They give up a draft pick for Josh Gordon. So the two teams, you're right, they needed receivers. They just didn't want you.
All right, moving on to the Vikings-Packers game from Sunday. The NFL confirmed the officials made the right call on the Clay Matthews roughing the passer penalty. In fact, the NFL is going to use Clay Matthews' penalty as a, quote, teaching tool for pass rushers. What do you make of this, Nick?
This is incredibly frustrating because there's no rule that says you can't admit you made a mistake. And if they had come out and say, hey, listen, Tony Carini was calling this both ways all game, so we don't think it affected the game because the Vikings got one and the Packers got one, but this was overcautious. He didn't land on him. He didn't lead with his helmet. He didn't pick him up and slam him. For the league to say, we're going to use this to show everyone what roughing the passer is,
right.
It's not fair, and I don't think it's accurate. And the officials who are now employed by television networks, like Dean Blandino, Mike Pereira, they agree with me that that is not roughing the passer.
Yeah, and you have to have some type of video to try to support your rule changes. You know what they did a few years ago when they changed the catch rule? They used to have Dez Bryant's catch on there highlighting what wasn't a catch. Then they put Jesse James in the highlight reel. You know what they're using now is what the catch rule is? They're using Dez Bryant again. The one that they were saying wasn't a catch, and now it is a catch. So,
mentor. Week 2, Bill O'Brien gets outcoached by his former understudy, Mike Vrabel. Ain't great opening couple weeks for one Bill O'Brien, and I think that is the biggest issue the Texans have right now. It's their head coach.
All right, we will end with Antonia Brown, who made waves yesterday on Twitter. AB took exception to a former Steelers PR staff member who tweeted, AB needs to thank his lucky stars because he was drafted by a team that had Ben, and Ben got AB paid. You know darn well he wouldn't put out those numbers for other teams. To which Antonio responded with, trade me. Let's find out. See, is Antonia Brown right that he'd be great no matter where he played?
I always say 99% of the players in the league need some type of system, and that's no slight on them. That's what you need. Football is a team sport, and it's also a system sport. So has he benefited from the system that they have in Pittsburgh? Yes, so have all the other great players that have played for Pittsburgh Steelers since they founded the team. It's an organization, a family, that decided to run their business, which is a family-oriented business, a certain way. And they started with their coaches, their general managers, and how they're going to select players and support those players by having other good players around them. So, yes, he has benefited from being on the Pittsburgh Steelers, but not just because of Ben Roethlisberger. It's just how they've decided to do business. They've had 3 coaches. So it's been a winning environment with all 3 of those coaches, from Chuck Noll into Cowher and into Tomlin. So every person in the organization has benefited from the Rooney family deciding that this is the way we're going to run it. They are great people. We're going to run this in a way that the people of Pittsburgh would be very, very proud. And they've all benefited. So to think that someone who worked in the PR department is some type of football expert and he's trying to throw some shade at him because he's saying that, no, I wouldn't be worried about that, because that's what people say to try to discredit you being successful.
And you know who also benefited? Ryan Scarpino, the former PR guy who now has a job with Allegheny County in the water department. I checked his LinkedIn. Pittsburgh Steelers prominently displayed their work with players, did interviews. That's why AB, I think, took this not like just a random. He knows the guy. The guy has a following through the Steelers, so he's talking to Steeler fans, and he's basically saying, Big Ben, without Big Ben, AB, who is he? Without Big Ben, AB is still one of the greatest under 6 feet players we've seen in this league. So I get it. Yes, you could argue he went to the best place for a wide receiver because they have
if they don't open up that offense and they don't support Ben, Ben could also be like Peyton Manning, a guy who won a couple Super Bowls on a defensive dominant-oriented team. That's the difference between
Eli
Manning. That's the difference between what people say in the business about Ben and what they say about Eli.
Right. That's why to me, I thought this was such a ridiculous comment. Like, yes, there are certain guys that we say they are a product of the system. Running backs in Denver post Terrell Davis. They had Mike Anderson or Landis Gary. It seemed like, man, you could almost put anybody back there. That zone blocking scheme, they're going to run for 1,200 yards. And then there are guys that are game changers. And Antonio Brown, he might not have had 1,800 yards and 120 catches if he played with a bad quarterback, but he'd be a Pro Bowler. No, the Big Ben doesn't help his hands, doesn't help his toughness, does not help his precise, nearly perfect route running, and does not make him spend the money he spends on his body each and every year. The counterfactual, how much has Big Ben benefited from AB? How much has everybody benefited from having one of the most consistent, week in, week out, unguardable guys in the league? Enormously. And so there is an element here where we sometimes just say, oh, yeah, this wide receiver, huge. Who's benefited more in the Julio Jones-Matt Ryan relationship? Because I would argue Matt Ryan. Sometimes it's the receiver who elevates the quarterback to a degree. It's not always that way. Sometimes a quarterback elevates the receiver. That's not what I see here. I think it's mutually beneficial. I don't think AB is actually saying trade me. I think it was, okay, you don't think I'd be good? Watch me anywhere. I'd be good anywhere. I wouldn't put this in the bucket with the other Steelers off the field, like the mutiny against El Bell or some of the other things we've seen.
Yeah, the players won't care about this. Most of them won't know, and the ones who do will laugh about it.
Right. Won't care. All right, moving on to the Eagles. After falling to the Bucs on Sunday, they made the much-anticipated announcement on Monday. Carson Wentz will finally make his season debut. He'll start this Sunday against the Colts. It will be the first game Wentz has played since injuring his knee in Week 14 last season. Doug Peterson says when it comes to